Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me again for another week of Compassion Coaching. I wanted to start off this live a little bit differently, and what I actually would like to do is tell you a little bit about myself so that you can get to know me better and what content to expect on my channels. So, for those of you who have recently started following my content, I have Instagram, Facebook, and now a YouTube channel where I'm posting content related to Compassion Coaching, which is the coaching company that I founded around relationship coaching and self-love mentorship. So I am Jessica. Hello. If you're following me, you know who I am. But for those of you who have been following me for a while, my career path and my trajectory has changed slightly. So let me tell you a little bit of what I'm about. So I founded Compassion Coaching as the self-love mentor and as a relationship coach because I saw how critical it was for me to be able to effectively and healthily manage interpersonal relationships that I have, in addition to being able to practice my own self-love and to cultivate a healthy and nurturing romantic relationship as well, and what that looked like. I started seeing how so much of what I had consumed as the form of either shows, books, movies, songs, etc., gave me a very misrepresenting perception on what love is and on what romance is. And I saw the ways that that ended up impacting my relationships throughout my adolescence and throughout my adult life. So, in founding Compassion Coaching, I work to disband some cultural norms, stereotypes, and conventional beliefs that we hold about what love is, about relationships, and about what it means to put self-love first and to take care of yourself, because those are so many subliminal messages that we receive every day about what is or is not appropriate when it comes to dating, romance, and also when it comes to self-love, mindfulness, and things of that nature. So, for as far as who I am someone who basically grew up in Florida, so shout out to South Florida homies, in Broward County and right by Miami-Dade County. But currently, I am actually living in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So I came back to my roots, having a mixed background and mixed heritage. So right now I'm in Rio de Janeiro and I do all of my work and all my recordings from here. That is why, even though it is winter in the United States, you see me sweating over here in Rio because it is very hot. And just to give you a little insight about my life, yeah, I live right by the beach. I literally drink coconuts every day. That is not a joke. Like the green coconuts that are picked off of trees. That's part of my life. That's part of what I do. And it's very warm here because here it's in the summer. The seasons are the opposite of the United States. But both of my degrees that I got, my bachelor's of science degree and my master's degree, were from the University of Florida. So shout out to all my Gators out there. And when I ended up graduating in the middle of a global pandemic last year in, I believe it was May of 2020, I began my journey to found Compassion Coaching later that year and to work on doing what I felt was best and doing what I felt would bring me happiness and joy in my career. And so that's how I got to where I am today. So now that you know a little bit more about me and a little bit more about where I'm from and how I got to where I am right now, and more about why I'm wearing summer clothes even though it's winter in the United States, that's a little bit of insight into who I am. So what you can expect on my channel and my content are things relating to tips that I've acquired through personal experience and through my studies and through my research about ways to practice mindfulness, ways to practice self-love, and ways to apply all of that to a relationship, and specifically to a romantic relationship with a partner. So, speaking of romantic relationships with a partner, what I want to focus on specifically for this video is on constructive versus destructive conflict in a relationship. So when you're in a relationship with someone, remember how earlier in my introduction I talked about the norms that we get from media and from books and songs and things like that. Those give us social and romantic norms as to what love looks like, as to what it looks like to date someone, and how your relationship should go. So part of those norms that I noticed that didn't serve me well were the norms that romance and love looks absolutely flawless. It is just beautiful, it's perfect. Now, I know that when I was younger, I watched a lot of let's say Disney movies growing up, or a lot of fantasy movies where there was just like such a beautiful romance where the princess would get swept off her feet and the prince was just perfect and they were perfect together. And that's a very non-realistic perception on what it does look like to be in a relationship and to be in a romantic partnership. So conflict is something that is expected in a relationship, and conflict is something that actually can be welcomed in a relationship, because conflict can be something that's positive when it's used positively between yourself and your partner. So there are two types of conflict that I identify, and that's constructive conflict and destructive conflict. So constructive conflict means when you are having a disagreement in a certain type of way that involves listening to each other, that involves respecting each other, and that involves growing together in the relationship, versus destructive conflict, which involves a totally different set of behaviors when you're disagreeing with someone. And that can look like raising your voice, shouting, calling names, insulting, getting upset. That can look like throwing something or hitting a wall or punching a door, slamming a door. So those are the two different types of conflict. It's kind of like night and day. So you can understand those differences. But what we've been conventionally taught that I've seen is that conflict is horrible. It's kind of like a mentality that if you fight with someone or if you disagree with your partner, you are doing something wrong, you are not a good match for each other, or you are not going to have a happy relationship or something like that. Because like we said, in a lot of shows and movies, there's more of a fluffy and perfect type of love. But if you disregard that social norm or that stereotype, then you can actually use conflict in a very positive way. So that way you can grow through your relationship and you can grow with your partner and get to know each other better. So a couple of important things to know as a baseline are that if you want to switch from destructive conflict to constructive conflict, or maybe you're at a place where you're already having constructive disagreements with your partner and you just want different tips and ideas, the first thing is to recognize if you're in more of a destructive place. So if you're dating someone and your arguments end up in a shouting match or in you cutting each other off and not listening to the other person speak, interrupting each other, not hearing the words the other person's saying, raising your voice, again, name calling or insulting, attacking the other person, also blaming or guilting the other person for something that they did or that they said. Those are all very destructive ways to engage in conflict, and those are not going to be helpful for the longevity of the relationship and for the growth of the relationship. So just identifying that in the first place and understanding if that is where you're coming from. And then once you're able to identify that, shifting more towards constructive forms of conflict sounds like no longer cutting the person off. It sounds like listening. So listening to that person while they speak and listening to what they have to say before you give feedback or before you respond. Now that's a very hard skill sometimes because when we're not happy or when we're upset, the urge is to want to get our word in or to want to say, oh, but wait, that's not what I meant, or that's not how it went, that's not what happened. So this is a really important skill that I teach and I love teaching because it is active listening and it's listening. So that's the first part of constructive conflict, is listening, not cutting the person off, and hearing what they have to say. Another component of constructive conflict is maintaining that sense of connection. So you're listening to each other now, you're not raising your voice, you're not cutting each other off, and it's completely cutting out any type of negative talk or insultive talk. So it's cutting out name calling, it's cutting out insults, it's cutting out negativity. So not attacking the other person by saying you are crazy, or by saying you're so stupid, or by saying anything like that, you're so dumb, because those are all destructive comments, as you can pretty clearly, it's pretty intuitive to know that that's not a great thing to say to someone in an argument, and that will generate more resentment and more negativity. So that's pretty intuitive. I don't think I have to break that down. So that's another part of it. Also in constructive conflict, there is a mutual respect. So that means that you respect differences, and even if you're not able to come to an agreement, that you can be respectful of the other person's opinions and the other person's thoughts. Because when you go into dating someone, you're dating a human who's had 20, 30, 40, 50 years of experience living their life the way that they've lived it before they started dating you, and before they married you, and before they met you. So understanding that that's a person with already, let's say, 2, 3, 4 decades of experience, and that your ideas might not be exactly the same as theirs, will help you shift towards a more constructive form of conflict and of communicating with each other. So understanding that, and at the end of the day, using conflict or disagreements as a way to grow with your partner. So saying, okay, at the end of the day, at the end of our disagreement, how can we grow from this? And understanding that you can take whatever event, topic, situation it was, and saying, so how can we grow going forward? How can we become better? How can we work together and make our relationship stronger as a result of what we talked about today? And I joked in my last week's video where I talked about some of the less sexy aspects of dating, because I was talking about, or I have recently been talking a lot about negotiating boundaries. And even though that's something that I joke is less sexy, this is similar too, because what you're doing is you're sitting down with another human being that you're interested in having a future with, or that you've been dating for a while and you have grown to love and trust, and you're sitting down with that other person, and you're recognizing it and acknowledging, and you're saying, I see you, and I'm in this, and I want this, and how can we grow going forward? I want this relationship. How can we grow the relationship going forward? So that is the biggest tip of constructive conflict, because that means using the connection that you have with your partner and being able to grow going forward. And that's very different from destructive energy, which is more of accusing and pointing the finger and saying, you don't understand me, you don't see me, you always do this, you never change, you say you're going to change and you never do, you're such a disappointment, etc. Again, that's so intuitive. I don't need to explain why that scenario would not be productive, would not be helpful, would not be healthy. That's very intuitive. So those are a couple of tips about constructive versus destructive conflict. And the biggest takeaway that I want to leave you with at the end of this video is just to understand that if you're in a relationship and you do run into bumps in the road, or you do run into disagreements, or you do realize that you and your partner do not agree 100% on absolutely everything, that is okay. And in fact, that is actually a good thing, because that gives you an opportunity to sit down and talk and to understand the other person better and to know how you're different and to respect that person for their differences. So get out of your head the fact or the idea that if you occasionally have conflict or if you have disagreements with your partner, that you're not okay, or that your relationship is not okay, or that you're doing something wrong, or that this isn't the way that love should be or romance should be. I must be doing something wrong, because I've seen so many examples of like these perfect relationships. So just get that thought. If you take anything else or nothing else away from this video, the one main takeaway that I would say is just get that thought out of your head. And just remember that having conflict is an incredible and actually fantastic part of a relationship. It can be an incredibly healthy part of a relationship. And having constructive conflict can help lead to growth and to evolution within the relationship. Whereas if you had a perfect relationship where you and your partner never disagreed, you would not be as capable of having those tough conversations, of understanding each other better, of respecting each other better, and of growing in that relationship as the people that you are. So get out of your head the idea that conflict is bad or negative. You just have to understand how you're having conflict and make sure it is safe, healthy, respectful, and using those guidelines for what constructive conflict looks like so that you can better understand your partner. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I can't wait to come back next week with more content, and I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend. Stay safe, everyone.